This video is going to explain genes and inheritance. So let's start with the basics. Here we have a cell, and there is the cell's nucleus. Inside the nucleus is all our genetic information. Now, our genetic information is organised into chromosomes. Now, in every human body cell, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. In other words, there are 46 chromosomes in every body cell. Now, all chromosomes are just coiled up DNA. And DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. A section of DNA, so here's a section of DNA, is called a gene. A gene will code for a particular protein, and in other words, it will code for our characteristics. Now, notice we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, why have we got pairs of chromosomes? Now, here we have an egg cell, so a female egg cell, and here we have a male sperm cell. The female egg cell will have 23 chromosomes in it. The male sperm cell will also have 23 chromosomes in it. During fertilization, when the sperm fertilizes the egg and forms a zygote, the 23 chromosomes from each combine together to make a zygote with 46 chromosomes in it. You're getting 23 chromosomes from your dad and 23 chromosomes from your mum. We call the sperm and the egg cells gametes. These gametes are haploid. They contain half the number of chromosomes in a normal body cell. The zygote, so the fertilized egg cell, has 46 chromosomes in it. This cell is said to be diploid. In other words, it's got double the amount in a full set of chromosomes, so 2 lots of 23. In this diagram down here, notice we've got pairs of chromosomes, so you've got 2 lots, a pair of chromosome 1. You've got 2 lots of chromosome 2. You've got 2 lots of chromosome 3, all the way up to 22. You've also got an X and Y chromosome. They're the sex chromosomes, determine your gender. If you're female, you're XX. If you're male, you're XY. Now, the important thing to remember is because you've got 2 copies of each chromosome, you'll have 2 copies of each gene. Now, here we have 2 chromosomes. Okay, they are one of the pair of chromosomes you have. If we draw some lines here to indicate a section of these chromosomes, in other words, it's a section of DNA, therefore it's a gene. Now, because they are the copies of the same chromosome, you've actually got 2 copies of the same gene. So let's say it's a gene for hair colour. And this chromosome you inherited from your father, and this chromosome you inherited from the mother. And let's say the father provided a gene for brown hair, and the mother for blonde hair. Which one's going to be shown? Now, an important term you need to know about is an allele. These, the blonde and the brown genes, are examples of alleles. They are different forms of the same gene. So you've got the gene for hair colour on both chromosomes. However, we've got different versions of that gene. You've got a brown version and a blonde version. So you've got different alleles of that gene. Now, if you have two copies of the same allele, so for example, if you inherited a blonde allele from the mum and also a blonde allele from the father, you are said to be homozygous. You have two copies of the same allele. However, if you have inherited a blonde allele from the mother and a brown allele from the father, in other words, you have different alleles for the same gene, you are said to be heterozygous. Now, a new term you need to be aware of is the phenotype. This just means that it's the displayed physical characteristics that are shown. So in other words, the actual hair colour of an organism. Now, whichever allele is going to be displayed in the phenotype depends on whether the allele is dominant or recessive. So, a dominant allele will always be expressed in the phenotype. A recessive allele will only be expressed in the phenotype if there is no dominant alleles present. So let's work through an example of how hair colour could be inherited. So, let's do a column for the mother, and let's do a column for the father. Let's say that the big B will be representing blonde hair, and little b will be representing brown hair. Now, when we're drawing genetic diagrams, the capital letter often indicates the dominant allele, and the lowercase letter represents the recessive allele. So in this example I'm making up, the blonde hair allele is dominant over the brown hair allele. So let's say the mother is homozygous dominant and the father is homozygous recessive. Now, all the eggs, all the gametes that the mother can produce, they will all only contain the big B allele because the mother doesn't contain any other alleles in there. Similarly, the father only contains the lowercase b alleles. In other words, for brown hair, the alleles for brown hair. So, we can then combine them in what's called a Punnett square diagram to show the different combinations of offspring that could be produced. So, this side's the mother and this side's the father. Now, if there is, the mother donates the big B, the father could donate a little b. So there's one potential offspring. Here's another potential offspring. We've got big B, little b. Here's another potential offspring. big B, little b. And here's another potential offspring combination, big B, little b. In fact, when you combine a homozygous dominant parent with a homozygous recessive parent, all the offspring, so all these here, are all heterozygous. They will contain one of the dominant blonde hair allele and one of the recessive brown hair alleles. Now, what colour hair will they have? The blonde hair allele is dominant, therefore it's always shown. And remember, the brown hair allele is recessive, so the brown hair allele is only shown when there's no dominant alleles present. Now in these four offspring combinations, there is always a dominant allele. So all these four offspring will all have blonde hair. So let's now see what happens if two heterozygotes reproduce together. So there's the mother, there's the father. So same idea, let's say the mother is heterozygous and the father is also heterozygous. Now remember, the big B is for blonde and the lowercase b is for brown. And remember, the big B, the capital B, is dominant and the lowercase b is recessive. So let's have a look at the mother first. The mother's gametes, the mother's eggs, will either contain a big B allele or a little b allele. Similarly, the father's gametes, so the sperm, will either contain a big B allele or a little b allele. Combine the two together in a Punnett square diagram. So let's say, so we've got the father's there and the mother's there. Let's see the combinations that can occur. So we've got big B, we've got big B, little b, we've got big B, little b, and little b, little b. So what will the phenotypes be? So what will the offspring actually look like? What colour hair will they have? This example, they are homozygous dominant. They have two copies of the blonde allele. Okay, so any individuals with big B will have blonde hair. These two, big B, little b, they are heterozygous. They have one big B allele and one small b allele. So one allele for blonde hair, one allele for brown hair. If you remember, the blonde allele is dominant, so it's always shown. This means these two individuals will also have blonde hair. Now, this offspring combination down here, little b, it is homozygous recessive. There are no dominant alleles present in this. It's just the lowercase b brown alleles. Because they're recessive, they're only shown if there's no dominant alleles present. This means this offspring will have brown hair. So, in this example, 75% of the offspring will have blonde hair and 25% should have brown hair. Now these are the expected percentages for each offspring. It's important to realise for each child there is a 75% chance of them having blonde hair and a 25% chance of them having brown hair. It doesn't mean that if a couple have 4 children, they will definitely have 3 blonde-haired children and 1 brown-haired child. That's wrong. It may happen, but it's not definite. The percentage is for each separate child. In other words, each child has a 1 in 4 chance of having brown hair, and it also has a 3 in 4 chance of having blonde hair. So, hopefully you now understand what a gene is and how they can be inherited.